If you were king.
So the world is a pretty messed up place. But just think how great it would be if you were in charge. If you were selected to be king of the world. Just think of all the good you could do if you were given unlimited power to make things right. You would make the world a veritable utopia. You could feed the poor and house the homeless and defeat the wicked and protect the innocent. You could save the world. Everyone would love you and thank you. If you just had the power, you could make everything fair and just and safe. Well, no, you couldn't. You might try and you might mean well, but any great and noble plans you had would soon fall apart, and you would turn into a tyrant. This isn't because you're stupid or because you're a bad person. Even if you're quite intelligent and have the best of intentions, all your effort to use your power for good would be an absolute, complete, and utter failure. Why? Well, let's consider a few examples.
Agenda item number 1. Helping the poor.
Suppose, as a benevolent king, you decided to give lots of stuff to the needy, to help the poor. Surely that would be a noble thing to do and would make society better, wouldn't it? Well, no, and here's why. Whether it's a king, a congress, or anything else, government doesn't create any wealth. Any wealth it gives away, it first has to take from somebody else. As king, before you could give anything to the poor, you'd have to take it from someone else. But suppose that someone else didn't want to hand it over. Whether he just wants to keep it himself or wants to give it away by himself, or thinks you do a bad job of it, if for any reason he didn't want to fund your plan, what would you do about it? If you're king, you don't just ask people nicely. Anyone can do that, but no one has to listen to them or cooperate. As king, you would be commanding people to fund your ideas. And those commands, if they're going to be any more than suggestions, will be backed by the threat of punishment for those who don't obey you. If some peasant doesn't think he can afford it, or doesn't trust you to spend it wisely, or just wants to keep his own money, what will you do about it? Just let it slide? Not if you want to have any power. If your subjects can ignore you without any consequences, then you have no power. So the peasant who wouldn't fund your plan must be punished and made an example of. Suddenly, you're not just benevolently giving stuff away, you're hurting people who don't want to do things your way. Whether you execute the peasant or imprison him or burn his house down or take some of his stuff, whatever, you'll be doing harm to him simply because he wouldn't let you take his money. Suddenly, being king isn't just about being caring and generous. It's not just about giving and helping. It's about controlling and punishing. It's about threatening and hurting people.
Agenda item number 2. Serving the common good.
Next, maybe you'd want to build public schools so your subjects' children could get a good education. And you'd build a big library and a public park and museums and zoos and a great road system and hospitals and all sorts of things that will benefit the people in general. And your people will love you for being so charitable and thoughtful. But again, how do you pay for it? Kings don't get castles and piles of gold by working hard. They get those things by taxing their subjects. Every penny you spend, whether you're spending it on yourself or on so-called public projects, you first have to take from your peasants. In reality, you're not giving them anything. You're merely spending their money for them. What if they wanted to spend it some other way? Well, if you let everyone spend his own money, you would have no power. Asking nicely won't do it. If some peasant wants to buy a bigger house instead of helping to pay for a library, or wants to buy more land or save for the future instead of chipping in for a public school, what will you do? If you do nothing and let him get away with that, all your power is gone. Again, to remain king, you have to punish those who won't fund your agenda. So not only are you merely buying the peasantry things with their own money, rather than giving them anything that actually belongs to you, but you're also threatening to cage or otherwise punish them if they resist your efforts to spend their money. You can loudly proclaim that it's for their own good and that your plan is better for the people as a whole, But if some of them don't see it that way, you're still going to have to send out your mercenaries to crush any dissenters.
Agenda item number 3, enforcing good choices.
So, trying to be a benevolent king by giving your subjects things that you bought with money you first stole from them turns out to be a lot less noble and less fun than you had expected. So you try a different approach. You decide to use your power and authority to make people live healthier lives. You require everyone to exercise for at least an hour a day and to eat a well-balanced diet. Undoubtedly, that would improve the health of many of your subjects. So how could they complain about that? What could be wrong with that? Well, what do you do if somebody disobeys? If some peasant won't eat his vegetables, what do you do about it? Ask nicely? Being in charge isn't about asking, it's about telling, it's about commanding. And a command isn't a command if there are no consequences for disobedience. So the non-compliant would have to be punished. Whether you take some of the peasant's money and call it a fine, or put him in prison, or have him publicly flogged, you will have to intentionally and publicly hurt him one way or another simply because he wouldn't follow your advice. If you ban smoking or drinking or using drugs or eating too much candy, there have to be adverse consequences to any peasant who disobeys. No matter how good you think your suggested choices might be, you're going to have your mercenaries forcibly punish in one way or another those who refuse to make the choices you think they should make, the choices you tell them to make. As a result, suddenly you're not just a helpful leader, you're a vicious thug. Even if the choices you're forcing people to make are what they should be choosing on their own anyway. Suddenly your good intentions, when combined with the exercise of power, become acts of violence. And suddenly your victims, your subjects, don't seem all that appreciative anymore. In fact, they seem to resent you and your supposedly benevolent agenda. But maybe you can still find a way to use your power for good.
Agenda item number 4, protecting the innocent.
What if, instead of trying to coerce your subjects into making good choices or funding useful projects, you stick to something more basic, just trying to protect the good people from any nasty crooks and thugs who might be living in your kingdom, which in this case is the entire planet. Surely there can't be anything wrong with that. If there is any way to use power for good, it has to be protecting the good from the wicked. So that's what you devote yourself to, confident that you'll finally make the world a better place as king. But again, your subjects don't have a choice about funding it. If they think your enforcers are abusive or corrupt, if they think your view of justice is skewed, if they don't think your protection services are worth the price, do you allow them to opt out? Not if you want to remain king. The mercenaries you hire, the prisons you build, the army you create with its war machines, not all of your peasants will want it or will agree with how it functions. Do you just say, I know best and it's for your own good, and then lock up those who don't pay? Do you force your version of justice and security on them, force them to pay for it and expect them to like it and thank you for it? To say that all you're doing is protecting people while you're sending armed thugs to collect payments from people who don't want your so-called protection makes you look more like the mafia than like a savior and protector. If some peasant wants to protect himself or wants to hire someone other than you and your goons to protect him, do you let him, or do you force him to fund your idea of justice and security? If a peasant doesn't like what your army does or how it does it, do you allow him to choose to not financially support your agenda? Again, retaining your power requires you to violently impose your agenda on your subjects, forcing them to fund it, crushing any resistance, and doing all of that in the name of defending them against thugs and thieves. And that's more than a little ironic. It's hard to feel noble and righteous, or even honest, while you're routinely committing aggression against people in the name of protecting them.
Agenda item number 5, sit in your castle and do nothing.
Well, it seems your ambition of using your newfound unlimited power to fix the world hasn't turned out so well. You tried to do good stuff and be caring and compassionate, but everything just came out as threats and violence, because after all, that's what law and government are. So in desperation, you decide to do nothing. You leave your subjects alone and you hide in your castle, sulking. But wait, how did you pay for the castle, and your guards, and all the luxuries you have? Even if you do away with most of it, whatever you end up with, are your subjects going to want to voluntarily pay for you to sit on your lazy butt while they deal with the challenges of reality on their own? Doubtful. So if you intend to continue in this life of luxury as king, you're still going to have to force your subjects to fund it. And that means even if you do nothing at all for the peasants, you're still going to need guards and an army and tax collectors just to remain king.
The punchline.
And that brings us to the final agenda item, the one you should have started with. When you were made king and appointed to be in charge of everything, you should have said no. When offered the opportunity to rule and command your fellow man, you should have turned it down. If given power over others, what you should have done with that power is nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because power via brute force cannot fix the world. Authoritarian control, whether wielded by a king or an elected government or a constitutional republic, cannot improve society. Why not? Because all such power by its very nature is nothing more than the ability to threaten people and hurt people. And whatever your intentions may be, you can't improve human society, you can't create peaceful civilization by threatening and hurting people. Shouldn't that be obvious, self-evident? Sadly, almost everyone has fallen for the utterly insane notion that the human race can be made more moral and more civilized by taking a few human beings and giving them permission to threaten and hurt, to forcibly rule and control everyone else. Such an idea is pure lunacy, no matter how popular it may be, and no matter how much rhetoric and how many excuses you pile on top of it. You can pontificate all you want about constitutions and elections, representative government, consent of the governed, and so on and so forth, but that won't change reality. And anyone who dares to objectively consider things for 5 minutes will see that the reality of the situation is this. Authoritarian power, in any form, regardless of the goal or motives, is nothing more than the addition of more aggressive, immoral violence into society. It doesn't matter how many nice suits, fancy hats, grandiose buildings, and pompous rituals and ceremonies you use. Whether it comes from King You or a bunch of elected politicians, the power to rule is always and inherently diametrically opposed to the power of being human. Want to fix the world? Throw the crown away. Ignore politics. Don't threaten, attack, or rob your neighbor, and don't vote for anyone who offers to threaten, attack, or rob your neighbor on your behalf. Don't, by yourself or by way of those in power, try to force others to be what you wish they were, or force them to fund what you wish they would fund. Instead, try treating your neighbor as if he owns himself, because he does.
If you want a more thorough understanding of why the game called politics is always destructive and immoral, get a copy of The Most Dangerous Superstition, available at Amazon.com.
That was If You Were King by Larken Rose, and this is Gnostic Media Research and Publishing's podcast episode number 138. I'm your host, Jan Irvin. This episode is an interview with Larken Rose, Part 4, titled Government, the Fallacy of Ad Verecundiam, Part 3, and is being released on Sunday, February 19, 2012. My interview with Larken was recorded on Friday, February 17, 2012. Larken has been here thrice previous, last June and the last 2 weeks, and he's back again as we complete our 3-part conversation on freedom and the appeal to authority fallacy, and ultimately, freedom. What does it mean to have a leader or government? Does government protect our freedoms, or are they the very cause of our enslavement? And what does it mean to vote? Does voting give us freedoms that we otherwise might not have? What if the idea of government was nothing but a religious myth, created by criminals and followed by billions of mindless zombie zealots the world over? just as any other religious dogma. What would happen if one day, just all of a sudden, everyone stopped believing in government? Today we complete our investigation in what it means to believe in government. Is government real or a figment of your collective religious imagination? Does not voting mean that we'd be sitting around like a bunch of lazy couch potatoes doing nothing? Or, if we use critical thinking, is it really our first course of action to disempower the criminals whom we call politicians? Is voting the only way to effect change? Or, in reality, is it one of the least effective ways to effect change and gain freedom? And what does it mean to live in a democratic or quote-unquote mob-ruled society anyway? Today we question some of our most firmly held governmental religious myths as we continue this investigation on the myth of government, exposing government as the fallacy of Ad Verecundiam. Larken Rose is a self-described enemy of the state and tax heretic, the author of several books, 2 of which were written during his 1-year stay as a political prisoner in the U.S. prison system. Mr. Rose is an outspoken advocate of self-ownership and a voluntary society. For more information, see larkenrose.com. That's Larken Rose, Rose.com. All right, Larken, welcome back to the Gnostic Media Podcast, and you're I think only the second guest who's ever done 3 episodes in a row. The last person to do so was Gene O'Denning, who brought us all the trivium, so glad to have you back for your 3rd time in a row, teaching us, and everyone else for that matter, teaching everyone about this most important subject of basically a voluntary type society, or essentially, well, we could call it anarchy, I suppose, and we'll get into that more as we go, but welcome back.
Thanks for having me back again. Yeah, you can tell it takes some effort to shut me up, so.
Well, it's quite all right. There's a lot to go in here, and I think people are really waking up, and by doing a really in-depth series on this, it's giving people the ability to really grasp it. So I'm hoping that you'll get quite a number of book sales out of it too, and the word will spread, especially, when people see that there's 3 shows with 1 guest all together, it's more likely that they're going to hit on it, because I'm probably covering something that, important that I want them to catch on to here.
Right, probably not casserole recipes or...
You don't teach us how to cook?
No, so were you hoping for that in the last part of the book?
This isn't the cooking channel?
No, sorry. I can add I can do cereal and maybe toast. I'm up there with Charlie Brown in my...
Oh, no. Don't do cereal and toast. That's wheat. You got to check out my interview with Dr. William Davis. He shows how wheat is a complete poison. You should go through and make sure your family's not eating any of it. In fact, your cousin and I have completely stopped eating it. It's been a complete health change around for me.
Yeah, actually, my wife and daughter are both gluten-free most of the time. My wife almost all the time. And I know it's totally bad, and I still eat some anyway because I'm stupid.
but you're so smart, and if you follow your logic in your own books and stuff, then you would have to recognize that they're using wheat as a poison to kill off the population and do their little eugenics programs, and that's how they keep the hospitals full. It's like if you understand the wheat issue, like Dr. Davis explains that he doesn't do any heart surgeries anymore because he tells all of his patients 3 to 6 weeks before any surgeries that they got to stop eating wheat. So by the time it's surgery time, of course, they're all cleared up.
Right, they don't even need anything.
They don't even need anything. And my stepfather has type 2 diabetes, and he's expecting by the end of this month to be completely off all of his insulin. He started off of it, he cut the wheat in January, and after the first week or 2, he had to cut the insulin by half, and then he's expected to be entirely off it by the end of the month.
Cool.
So and that's just not eating wheat. So right. it's pretty wicked stuff.
But wait, the government gave us that awesome food pyramid with wheat as the huge thing at the bottom that you're supposed to eat lots of.
Wheat and grains, and in fact, whole grain wheat is 10 times worse than the processed stuff.
Yep. So, good thing authority was telling us what to eat. Really worked out great.
Worked out great, so they can make money off of killing us.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw. So, Larken, why don't you tell us how is voting an act of aggression, and how does someone who votes condone violence against his neighbors?
Well, this is one of the weirder things about the belief in government and authority, because it's one of those things that people, they don't know and they totally do know. And here's why I say that. If you go up to somebody and you say, you just voted for that guy, you're condoning violence against me. They say, what are you talking about? No, I just voted. I didn't attack you. I didn't do anything. But if you walk them through it, there's no part of the chain of what actually happens that they're unaware of. You say, okay, you vote for that guy. What's your goal? Well, to have him get into office. Okay, then what does he do? Well, he enacts laws. Okay, these laws, are they polite suggestions? Is he going to give me some helpful advice, like eat lots of wheat? That'll give me colon cancer. Well, no, he's not just giving you advice. They're laws. You have to obey the laws. Okay, or else what? Or else consequences. Like what? Like you get put in prison or you get fined. Okay, so you're electing a guy who you know is going to get up there and he's going to use power over me to force me to do what he thinks I should do and to force me to give him my money and hurt me if I don't. And it's one of those things that if you put it literally, it makes everybody uncomfortable, even though they know every bit of it. It's not like they say, oh gosh, I didn't know they like imprison people who don't pay. Everybody knows they do. So, like I said, they totally know that there's violence behind it all, but they go into this weird intentional blindness to pretend that voting is some, this is my voice and how we work together as a people. No, it's how you violently impose your agenda on me by way of a third party. And when you put it that way, almost everybody gets uncomfortable because they don't. It's a good sign. It's a good sign that they get uncomfortable because they don't want to admit that they're advocating violence because in most cases they know that's bad. But if you walk them through it, they know that that's the end result. You vote for somebody, you're putting someone in a position of power who's going to violently impose his agenda, his beliefs, his values, his ideas on millions of human beings. And that's not okay, as much as we're taught all the happy garbage about how great democracy is. No, it isn't. It's fighting over what the guy with the club is going to do with it, who he's going to hit and why. That's not noble or civilized. It's violent thuggery. So that's my relatively short answer.
What is the double standard to use violence in people who believe in government?
Well, yeah, these people would never do it. The vast majority of people who vote for somebody to steal my money under threat of hurting me for, whatever, pay for the war machine, pay for welfare state, pay for schools, pay for whatever they hope the government's going to pay for. If I say, well, tell you what, how about if we just skip the middleman? We do this openly and honestly. You come to my house with a gun, you point it at me, you tell me how much money to give you, and I give it to you. So, we can do away with the game and the joke and the facade that this is legitimate and somehow nonviolent and peaceful. Just do it directly. And everybody says, no, I would never do that. Well, then why would you vote for somebody else to do it? Which is what they all do. And they really, even in their own heads, they don't grasp that basically the exact same act is the exact same act. If you rob me yourself at gunpoint, or you have somebody else rob me at gunpoint, or you vote for somebody else to rob me, it's the same thing. But people are taught to believe that this thing called government and authority, that they have the right to do this to people. So they don't perceive it as, they don't even perceive it as violence, because they think, well, that's law, that's tax collection, and it's necessary, and of course we have to have that. And they have all these excuses they've been taught where that leads them to see something that in any other situation they would know it's immoral, it's evil, it's uncivilized, it's horribly destructive. But in the context of government, they suddenly think it's okay and good and necessary and a great thing to do. And they're wrong.
How does applying for a government job compare to asking that one's neighbors be forced to pay your salary?
Yeah, this is one that that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, because I basically tell people, look, if you get a job, even if it's a relatively nice job, like you drive around and pick up the roadkill off the roads or something, you paint the lines, whatever, you actually do something that could be seen as useful. And I say, well, okay, that part's good, except you're still accepting stolen property from me. Like, what you get paid with is taken from me and lots of other people under threat of caging us. And that's not okay. The fact that you do something useful afterwards isn't okay. And again, if it's not in the setting of government, people know that. They know that it's not okay. Well, I go and rob my neighbors at gunpoint, but afterwards I go around and pick up trash in the neighborhood, and so that makes it okay. Nobody would argue that except in the context of government, which they do all the time. And people they don't like to hear, because basically it's accusing them of accepting stolen property. And if you work for the government, you're accepting stolen property. And they don't want to admit that's what it is, because they know that that's bad. Accepting stolen property is bad, but they want to imagine that if it's called government and done by way of law, then it's not bad.
How does authority get people to believe that the victims of violence and abuse are actually the perpetrator?
Yeah, that's a really glaring one. Is a really glaring problem with the belief in authority is most people cheer when the victims of government aggression get crushed, whether they're caged or fined or even killed. And you can see this on a huge scale in the drug war as one example. There's lots and lots of examples, but that's a really obviously, directly, openly brutal example of, oh, well, he broke the law by having some marijuana, so we're glad that, a bunch of psychos with machine guns kicked his door down and dragged him away and put him in a cage for 10 years. And if that guy defended himself and said, I don't care that you have a piece of paper that says I'm not allowed to do this, I'm not letting you take me hostage, and he turns around and shoots the invaders, the aggressors, the people who started the fight, like he's there smoking a joint in his living room, and a bunch of armed lunatics called law enforcers come into his house, and he shoots them, almost everybody would say, oh, he's horrible. How could that guy have shot police officers, officers of the law? Because the belief in authority in government so skews their understanding of right and wrong. It literally turns it 180 degrees in the wrong direction, because they view the victims of government aggression as deserving it. And if they resist, then they view the victims as the most evil, nasty people in the world, when it's the exact opposite of reality. The aggressors, aggression is bad, defending yourself is good. It's not all that complicated, except when the belief in government enters the picture and it turns everything upside down in most people's eyes.
What are some of the glaring cult-like rituals that go along with believing in government?
Well, this is in the most dangerous superstition, I talk about how the belief in government really is it's like a faith-based religion. It isn't like a rational construct. It's not just a way to organize. And you can actually see it in the rituals, like, the inaugurations and elections and all these, they have these gigantic, grandiose buildings where they get together and talk in a really weird, stupid way, my esteemed colleague from blah, 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 blah. And the courts especially, you get this guy, at least they don't wear the powdered wigs anymore, but it's not much better. Guy wears a black dress and has a wooden hammer and sits up above everybody else in this grandiose, temple, and pretends to be God. And so all these things, people don't look at them objectively and see, wait, this is really weird. Like, if we're actually just talking about how to organize stuff, why would we have these big, elaborate ceremonies and rituals and these huge buildings that look like cathedrals? What's the point of that? And it's because...
Well, sure, they bang the gavel on the counter. They have these gowns that they put on and these hats and all of this silly stuff, and they parade into a room and they sit up at the front and, have all of their subjects come and sit in front of them like the king's court and all of this stuff. And and in fact, if you look at the rituals the government does, like even your local city or county government, it's very much like the old religious cult ceremonies.
Yeah, and the only reason people don't recognize that is because they're sort of used to it. Like they've seen it their whole life, and hardly anybody objectively, steps back from what they're used to and says, "Wait, this looks really weird. Like if you go to a meeting of some archery club, whatever, stamp collectors, whatever, a club, they can have rules and they can have procedures and stuff. But you don't bow to them. There isn't the god of the club that we all call Your Honor, and he wears a big robe. And there are in the control freak, brotherhood clubs, Skull and Bones, and that garbage, which is just an imitation of.
Oh, well, the Masons and stuff have your most worshipful master.
Right. They have this cult lunacy going on, but most people in their everyday lives don't. But they actually, basically, what I say is government, the difference between government and every other religion is government is the religion that people actually believe in. And I like offending people when I say that because most people who call themselves Christians or Muslims or Jews or atheists or agnostics or whatever else, most of them, that's just sort of like what they do on Sunday or Saturday. What they actually believe in, what they actually worship is the state, is government. That's what they actually pray to give them blessings. That's what they actually obey. That's what they actually feel bad about disobeying, breaking the law. The 10 Commandments, who cares about them? When it comes to the government, it says we're allowed to steal, we're allowed to do all these nasty things. That's who they actually worship. And so they don't notice when they're watching rituals how just bizarre they are and how it's just a giant cult ritual that everybody's used to, so it doesn't feel weird because, well, this is what we do. We all pray to to that big guy up there who has his big temple and all his underlings, and you have the high priests of the cult of government and everybody in between. And if you look at it objectively, it's bizarre. But because everybody's used to it, nobody looks at it objectively. Almost no.
And the funny thing is the president would be nothing other than like the Pope.
Yeah. Yep. Only a lot more violent and a lot more power.
I mean, if you I guess you're right, because even the Inquisitions, they didn't kill near as many people as just say someone like Bush killed during his tenure. I mean, surely Obama's killed a number, but I doubt it's anything like Bush did.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the scoreboard is up to at this point. He's still got time. He may get up there, and that's the mass murder that goes on. And see, it used to be that the churches were actually seen as the real authority, and they'd have inquisitions and crusades, and they'd go around killing people and say, you don't believe in what that pacifist guy said, so we're going to torture you and kill you. You
don't believe in the Republican Party, we're going to kill you.
Right, you disobeyed us, so we will crush you. Nowadays, almost everybody, at least in the Western world, government is the cult they now believe in. It is their religion. It's the thing they bow to. It's the thing that it's the superhuman entity that they believe has a right to dominate us mere mortals. And the other stuff is, what building they go to on Sunday. Who cares?
And they'll argue more extensively regarding government and keeping themselves under its mind control than their religious mind control.
Yep. Oh, and if you suggest to somebody that there is no God, they get less upset than if you suggest, what if we didn't have a government? They get more emotional at the idea of no ruling class than they do.
I think you're throwing their brain into this swirl that they just can't comprehend. It's like contrary to everything they worship and believe in. But the rational mind just takes information in and sees it and applies it and and you filter through it all and remove all the contradictions, and what you're left with isn't your government or your religion.
Right. It's reality, and it may be horribly uncomfortable. It may go against what's been programmed into your whole life, but you kind of have to make a choice. Do you actually want to know the truth?
Sorry for waking you up, folks. You can push the pause button and go back to sleep at any time. We'll be here when you're ready.
Should have a bucket of blue pills somewhere. Here you go. You can go back. Never mind.
Yeah, just go right back into the Matrix. You're not good here.
We'll plug you back in, no problem.
That's hilarious. So let's talk about forced benefits. What are the problems with the argument there?
Again, there's so many arguments that people use about government that they never use in any other context because they immediately see how stupid they are. Like if they say, people will say, well, you drive on the road, so you're just paying for services. And I put that in any other context. Like I often say, look, if I steal $100 from you at gunpoint and give you like a stale sandwich and you eat it, does that mean everything was okay? Because, hey, you're just paying for the services you received. What, are you some sort of freeloading crook who thinks he can have a stale sandwich without giving me $100? Nobody would use that argument except in the context of government. Nobody would use the argument that it's okay for one person to forcibly rob somebody else and then decide what quote-unquote services to give to his quote-unquote customer, decide what the price is. He may decide to do a million things the guy doesn't even want.
Right, yeah, and take a huge fat cut for his new house in the countryside off of all that for himself.
Right, and then tell the person that if he complains, he's the nasty, greedy, freeloading crook, because, you enjoy the stale sandwich I gave you, but you don't
it's like those Dale Carnegie books and all that stuff. They all teach you, to be happy about paying your taxes and doing good for society. And
right.
It's like, and it's like those books in and of themselves are a type of brainwashing to get people to go out and grind the sales mill for the factory. And,
right.
And I used to be in sales and used to see all that stuff. And because of my other research, I knew it was mind control, but I didn't know it explicitly as I do now with the trivium and with this stuff, how all that works. But yeah, you get in there and, it goes away, falls apart.
Yeah. Yep. And it's a very effective programming. And the people who tell me I'm proud to pay my taxes, I say, how can you be proud of something that you didn't have a choice? Like they said, you're going to do this or we hurt you. Like, I'm proud to give my car to a carjacker. Like, if it was your choice of your own free will, you donated your money to some worthy cause or whatever, okay, then be proud. But to be proud that you got robbed, how loony is that?
I'm proud that I gave my daughter to the local rapist.
Right. Oh, I feel so selfless and
I meant the Catholic Church. I'm sorry.
Same thing. But the whole law-abiding taxpayer, I always harp on that term because people are proud to be law-abiding taxpayers. What it means is they do whatever the politicians tell them and they give the politicians their money under threat of being punished if they don't. Why would you be proud of that? You're being victimized. It's like being proud that you got mugged. Like,
well, that's the fallacy of ad verecundiam, which is, it's like I'll hit you with a bat if you don't do this. And, just like government is ad verecundiam, or the appeal to authority, the whole appeal to violence is ad verecundiam, and it's essentially saying that if you don't do what I say, I'm going to beat the crap out of you.
Right. And for people to take pride in then obeying, it's loony. Like, what? It wasn't your idea. They said you're going to do this or we'll hurt you. And then you did it. Why would you, I could see doing it out of self-preservation.
You just have way too much time to think. You should get a job.
Yeah.
Don't you hear that story? I love when people hear, oh, isn't it funny how only people who don't have jobs believe in conspiracy theories? It's like, oh, so because I actually take the time to look at something and research it and investigate it while you're at the grind, then, the correlation isn't that I did the research and fact checked this. The correlation is that I'm at home while you're physically doing the work of a slave, essentially.
Right, on the hamster wheel going along.
Yeah, on the hamster wheel, and it's not the person who's looking at the research going, hey, let's use some fallacy to dismiss it and say, it's just those people who don't have normal jobs for the great outstanding corporations of the world.
Right, those malcontent nonconformists. That's another thing that goes along with it, is the idea, why can't you be happy with what you have? And it's good to be happy with what you have, but it's also good to try to fix what's wrong. Like, if I was standing there hitting them in the head with a bat, And they said, ow, stop that. Well, why can't you be happy with what you have? Look, you have a nice house. You know, you have plenty of food.
Try that argument when you're driving down the freeway with smoke coming out from underneath the hood, right? Why don't you just be happy with what you have? Don't try and fix anything. Don't call the mechanic.
There's so much good going on. Just ignore the flames coming out from under the
just
hood.
pull out some burgers and some hot dogs and get busy.
Yeah.
You know? Turn this situation into lemonade.
If the world gives you lemons, that's what I was saying. And just, and what it really is they want an excuse to not have to think about it. Because they want, their life is comfortable enough that they'd rather not have to go out on a limb. First of all, they certainly don't want to have to stand up and put themselves at risk, but they don't even want to have to intellectually put themselves at risk by thinking about stuff and maybe coming to the realization that there really are some things that are horribly wrong and need to be fixed. So they just sort of, put on the blinders and whine at anybody who doesn't. Whine at anybody who says, something's horribly wrong and we really should do something about it. No, shut up, you're a malcontent. Let me back on my hamster wheel.
Yeah, and then that's when we get into the positive thinking stuff, sit on a pillow and let everybody else handle everything. And, oh, look, he's being negative. I'm going to sit here and wait and just be positive. It's like, right. Oh, boy. Okay, yeah, don't act, don't do anything, be a good little slave. Meditate, go do that, yeah.
Right. I don't mind being positive, but if you think that's going to stop, the guy with an axe who's just kicked down your door, it's not going to work too well.
What's happened, though, is there's been a whole positive thinking movement that's kind of come out in the last 10 or 15 years that has really been pushed through these new age, like the 2012 movement and stuff started mostly by Terence McKenna, but it's been pushed through those channels, and it's really created a whole group of people that, what better system of mind control than to create a whole group of young hippies who don't protest like they did in the 60s and take action, but they sit down and meditate and go, let somebody else take care of it,
Right. Sit around and be happy. And that's the thing, I intentionally guilt trip people who do that. Like they say, well, we have so much. Why are you complaining? Look at all the riches around you. And I say, that money you just gave to the IRS, they just blew up a bunch of brown people on the other side of the world with it. Are you okay with that? Don't tell me I should sit here and be happy while we're funding the mass murder of people on the other side of the world. And don't you sit there and be happy like you have enough good stuff that doesn't matter. So I totally intentionally guilt trip people with that and say, if if it was just you, if the slave master was just hitting you and you wanted to just put up with it and be a wimp about it, well, okay, I would let you. But they're taking your money and funding evil all around the world, here and the other side of the world and, everywhere, and to just sit there and go, oh, but we have lots of nice things. Some people don't. Some people have bombs landing on their houses paid for with the money you gave to the government. And just, to pretend that being happy and thinking positive is going to fix that, well, people are dying. Lots and lots of innocent people are dying.
Happy.
Right, you can't stop a bomb with don't worry, be happy. So it would be nice if you could, but it doesn't work.
All right, so in your book you say that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are a combination of profound insights and glaring contradictions. Would you like to expound on that? Yeah.
It's a lot of what the founder said was a mixture of wisdom and complete insanity. And unfortunately, people so often, they want heroes and they want villains. And they don't want to have to think about things and distinguish, hey, he was right about that, he was wrong about that. Thomas Jefferson is a perfect example. Lots of people say he was totally evil because he had slaves. Yes, having slaves is totally evil. But they say, so I'm not going to listen to anything he said. And other people he was the founder of this country. We're going to listen to everything he said and assume that he got everything right. If you actually look at what the founder said, the contradictions just punch you in the nose. I mean, if you just look at the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, you can skip all the debates even. All men are created equal. By the way, those guys over there, they have the right to steal your money. Wait, what happened in between? Declaration says all men are created equal. Constitution says Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes. What the heck happened in between? I can't do that, and I'm obviously not equal to the guy who is allowed to steal my money. I'm not allowed to steal their money. What between? And you don't get an explanation. You don't get, well, here's why it's legitimate, because, they couldn't possibly come up with an explanation. So they just leave the contradiction sitting there, and most people don't look at it because they revere the Declaration of Independence and Constitution like they're, divine documents, and they don't want to look at them and say, wow, yeah, that's a glaring, obvious, stupid contradiction. Just like Declaration says, basically when any government becomes destructive of individual rights, the people have the right and duty to alter or abolish it. Now, first of all, it's sort of funny that they say that because every government, as soon as it exists, is violating individual rights. But aside from that, in the Constitution, it says, oh, yeah, the Congress can call out the militia to crush insurrections. Oh, great. So when they start oppressing us, we have the right to resist them, and they have the right to kill us when we do. That sounds like an outstanding plan. That'll work wonderfully. But people just don't notice these obvious, glaring contradictions even in the philosophy. The Declaration of Independence was really close to being an anarchist document. The only real glaring mistake in that thing was to claim that governments are instituted to protect individual rights, which, no, every government in the history of the world, first thing it ever does is violate individual rights. But other than that, it basically says, hey, we're all the same. We don't get our rights from government. They don't have the right to rule us. It just goes on and basically says, look, we all own ourselves. But they sort of, of course, they meant mostly white male landowners, but oh well, close enough. And then they go to the Constitution, and suddenly it's a list of things that this ruling class is allowed to do to us. And it's a pretty short list, relatively speaking. But what happened to we're all the same, and we all have the same rights, and our rights don't come from government? Oh, and by the way, they're allowed to control you and rob you. So it's the fact that people can't look at that and say, okay, there's the wisdom and there's the insanity, because they want to take the whole thing. They want the whole thing to either be good or bad, to either be smart or stupid, and they don't want to fish through it and say, yeah, there were parts of that just didn't make any sense. They were just, recycled tyranny. They were the mentality of slaves mixed in with the mentality of self-owning human beings. And they don't mix. They don't add up to a coherent anything. But people don't like to look that close at something that they've been taught, this is the great, profound document upon which blah, blah. And so they don't want to look at it objectively to actually see how much of it makes sense and how much of it is completely bogus.
Does the problem of government reside in the people called government, or in the minds of people who believe in it, or the victims?
Yeah, this is the thing that gets me in trouble every election season, because there are so many people out there who see government as the problem, see the people in government as the problem, so they focus on that and say, how do we change that? How do we put in the right people, or how do we convince them to not
Bush,
pass
Obama,
this law?
Ron Paul.
Right, run. You have to run for office, and you have to fix this and repeal that and pass a law that says this and that and the other thing. And they don't get that the problem has nothing to do with the people who call themselves government. It has to do with the perception of their victims, because it is the perception of the victims of the state that give it all of its power. And that's, that one of the main points of my book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, is that the real problem isn't that evil people believe in authority. Because evil people, whether they believe it's authority or not, they're going to try to hurt you and take your stuff. Oh well. The problem is that good people hallucinate an obligation to obey and give money to the evil people because they're called government and their demands are called laws. And it mangles people's minds so they can't see reality. They can't see that the problem is inside their own head. It really is like a bunch of, a plantation with a bunch of slaves on it. And the slaves think that they're supposed to be slaves. They take pride in working hard for their master, and they, scorn any slave who tries to run away as a thief. And in that situation, the problem is really their own mentality. It's inside their own heads. And that's true of everyone who believes in government. The politicians are not the problem. Yeah, they're a bunch of liars and crooks. I'm not saying they're nice guys out to fix the world. But the only reason they have any power is because their victims imagine them to have the right to rule. If tomorrow everybody woke up and said, Congress, IRS, what's that? Never heard of it. That's it. It just stops. Because if people don't feel a moral obligation to obey, we outnumber them a gazillion to one, it just screeches to a halt. It only keeps going because people want the approval of authority. And they imagine government to be real and legitimate. And they want to be law-abiding taxpayers. And they don't get that their own desire to have the approval of people in power, to have the approval of authority, is the most toxic thing in the history of the world, is thinking that obedience to authority is a virtue. That is the source of the vast majority of evil that has occurred in history.
How do we deal with issues like primate organization? For instance, we hear of alpha males. Have you seen the film Star Suckers by chance?
No, I don't think so.
You should really watch that. But
I'll make a note of it.
Yeah. How do we move away from our natural tendency towards authority that seems to be part of our natural primate organization, like the alpha male in the chimpanzee or orangutan groups, and just like we have the leader figure in the human primates? So how do we deal with an issue like that?
Yeah, I do think there's definitely a factor there of just how we're wired as an animal species that tends to do that hierarchical thing, left over from chimpanzees and whatever. But I think people overestimate how big that tendency still is, because it's the easiest way to explain war and oppression and tyranny and nastiness is, well, I guess people are just nasty. Some people are going to try to rule the world. Others are going to want a leader. And there is some of that, but I think it's less than people believe. But to me, even if, let's say a bunch of people do want to be just sort of mindless followers, and some people want to rule the world and control everything, ironically, some people say, well, we need government to protect us against those people. And I say that your solution is completely incompatible with what has to happen, because what you're saying is there are some people who want to rule the world. So what we have to do is make a club of people who rule the world and ask them to protect us. If somebody on your block, somebody in your neighborhood wants to be alpha male and boss people around, there's this invention called the firearm. And it sort of puts up a pretty big obstacle to him having his way unless he gets elected. Because if he gets elected, most people say, well, now he's the law, and I'm not going to resist law enforcement. I'm going to pay my fair share. But without government, if he goes, I'm in charge, one person, it only takes one person to say, you're not in charge, and you're going to stop trying to threaten me and control me, or I'm just going to shoot you. And then you won't be in charge anymore. So I think that, that tendency isn't at all a serious threat in human society, except when it's combined with the belief in government. When there's this position of power, like I often say, the problem is not the guy on the throne. It's the fact that there is a throne for a guy to be on. And who do you think is going to try to go there? The guy who wants to rule the world. So it'll be a fight between all the guys who want to rule the world to see who can get on the throne. If you don't have the throne, then literally whoever wants to be a bully or a control freak has to do it by brute force. And that doesn't work well when there are, just in this country, 90 to 100 million people with guns. How many people do you think one guy could bully and control in this country with that many armed people? It would last for 5 minutes.
3 million guns sold in the month of December.
Woohoo!
What happens when someone finally breaks free from the belief in authority?
Well, the first step, which is sort of disturbing, it was for me and it was for a lot of people I know, the world instantly looks completely different. Like reality literally turns upside down and inside out, and what you thought was real, you suddenly realize this isn't. I have never lived in the world that I imagined for the first 20 some years of my life. There has never been such a world as what I imagined it to be then. Because when the belief in authority and government falls apart, when you see through the lie, suddenly you realize, wait, there's just this gang of liars and crooks robbing 300 million people, and they believe it. They think they should go along with it. And it's, it really is taking the red pill, because you suddenly realize there are millions and millions of human beings who are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to be decent people. They may try pretty hard to not think about things, but they're not trying to be malicious, that are just hooked into this mental cage called authoritarianism, and it leads them to fuel some of the evilest people in the world. And so when you get outside of the lie of authority, the whole world looks completely different. Like, one of the biggest things is you realize there is nobody in the world above me. There are people who have more money, there are people who are smarter than me, and they're better at this and that and the other thing. But nobody has the right to rule me, and I don't have the right to rule anybody else. It really is a world of equals. Not just it sounds nice in the Declaration and then let's make this ruling class. That's what reality is. You are on an equal par with however many billion other human beings on the planet. And when you suddenly come to that realization, it's like, it's like you've been an animal in a cage your whole life, and somebody opened the door and you realize, wow, the whole world is just there. I'm in charge of me. And that's sort of the flip side of realizing we're all equals, is I'm in charge of me. Now, that's sort of really cool and sort of scary.
Isn't that the irony that animals, wild animals especially, already get that they have to take care of themselves and feed themselves and get through the winter and all of that stuff, and yet here are humans that are supposed to be the smart ones, and yet we can't take care of ourselves. So who's in a better position, the wild animals or the people? That's kind of an ironic position to be in.
Right, because we've been domesticated, and they haven't. We've been domesticated by our masters to think that the cage is what we're supposed to be in. We're proud to be in the cage, and this is where we belong. And when you escape the belief in authority, you realize it isn't. And the scary part is it means I'm completely responsible for everything I do, and I have to figure out right and wrong. I have to make the choices. And ultimately, if there are problems in the world, if something should be done, I'm the one who has to do it. Not by myself. But it's the scary part is realizing I can't just cry to some, mythical deity called government to fix everything, because it was a lie. It's just people. And if somebody ought to do this, why isn't there somebody me? And the idea that, we need a law that says this, or a government program that says, no, we're just people. You're at the top, which means you are the highest responsible being on the planet, tied with several billion other people. But you're at the top. There's nobody above you. There's nobody beneath you. It's just, we really are equals. We each own ourselves. And it's very freeing, but at the same time, it adds a huge amount of responsibility.
Larken, I would say it's just blasphemy.
Yeah, I hope so.
No, I mean, what you're saying is blasphemy.
Yeah, it's blasphemy against the most dangerous, evil cult that's ever existed, exactly. The belief in government. And so I love to be a heretic against them. It's my hobby.
Exactly. Love it. It's what gets me up in the morning. How should a governmentless society deal with acts of aggression?
Okay, yeah, that's a thing that almost everybody asks once they start to think about the idea of a stateless society is, well, what do we do about the murderers and thieves? And some people even say, because there's nothing that's going to stop them from hurting me if there's not government. And I usually ask, well, so you would just sit there? You'd sit there and let the guy beat you up because you can't dial 911? That's what you would do? To me, the only difference, and a lot about society wouldn't change when the belief in government and authority falls apart. For example, you're still allowed to defend yourself. You're allowed to organize with others.
Yourself or yourself?
Oh, both.
Okay, well that's good. Well,
Yourself.
it's what people need to realize. It's like Switzerland. Okay, Switzerland is one of the most heavily armed countries in the world, where they don't have any outlaw or any laws against like assault rifles. Instead, the government there gives every single member of the country an assault rifle. And if you're a robber and you know that the house you're about to break into has the exact same assault rifle that you were given, and you know that the people inside that house know how to use and went through the exact same training that you did with that weapon, you're probably going to hesitate quite a bit more. It's like in Australia a couple of years ago, they banned guns, and overnight you have this spike through the roof of all of this violent crime against people that turned in their guns. And
Right.
The criminals, of course, kept their guns. And, so now all of these people no longer have the right to defend themselves, and they have to sit there and wait for 911 to get there. And meanwhile, all the criminals have all the guns. It's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, people they don't get what the deterrent effect is. The criminal who his own moral conscience, his own code, his own values, whatever, they don't stop him from trying to break in and steal my stuff. He doesn't care if there's a law about it. He just cares if somebody might hurt him.
Sure.
It's just, an animal makes that decision. Like, if I attack this thing, is it so big that it's going to kill me?
Right. And one thing I should also point out is that Switzerland, one of the most heavily armed countries in the world, has one of the lowest crime rates. In fact, it's 0.1% difference compared to England, which is one of the most fascist, heavily surveillance countries in the world, with guns completely banned. And they have the same murder and crime rate, except one is completely armed and can defend itself and can build one of the largest armies in the world in a few hours, and the other one is completely defenseless if anyone should really want to come and invade it.
Right. And the law and authority in government has nothing to do with it. It's just the ability to use defensive violence. And if you have that, it works. It works as a deterrent.
And it's
don't
like
care whether
sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say, it's just like, with martial arts, you use it for a deterrent, for your defense. You don't go around, with karate or jujitsu and just walk around and kicking people's ass for the fun of it. I mean, hopefully you don't. They usually beat people down in in the dojos that do stuff like that, and teach them how to only use these tools for defense and for matches and things like that. But it should always only be used for defense, but you still need to know it. The only way you can defend yourself against somebody who's going to attack you, or whether it's mentally or verbally, is have the same tools and ability that your opponent has.
Right. And most people know that you're only supposed to use it in self-defense. That it's okay to defend yourself. It's not okay to commit aggression against somebody else. But for some reason, they imagine that government is some serious part of the equation. Like, guy kicks down my door and he's there to rob me and I'm pointing my Glock at him. You think he's going to say, oh, well, you don't have a badge, so I don't care. Like, the badge isn't what he cares about. It's the gun, and we're still going to have them. And the only difference in a stateless society is people would only use force in situations where they personally believe they have the right to do it. Whereas right now you have thousands upon thousands of quote-unquote law enforcers using those guns, using that violence to do things that they would never do on their own. Locking up people for weed or whatever else.
Let me ask you, let's go back to like the idea of sovereignty from the 1800s, where, if somebody insulted you or insulted your honor, you took it out into the street. And, sword duels, gunfights, gun duels, things like that were very common. And you did have a sheriff figure who was really there to make sure that the fight was fair. And if there was violence or robbery committed against someone, against their will, they would step in for that. What do you have to say about that kind of law or sheriff-type person in a community?
Yeah, well, once upon a time, sheriffs were really close to what we would have in a stateless society, where they really were peacekeepers. It's the guy you call if somebody's breaking into your house or picking a fight with you or whatever. And you can still have that because you have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to hire somebody else to defend you. You know, these are rights that everybody has. The only thing that government adds is the idea that the sheriff somehow magically has some extra rights. He can do some other stuff that's bad if anybody else does it. And for a long time, the sheriffs didn't even bother to do that. They really were almost just private security, except they were usually funded by stealing a little bit of people's money. But yeah, that's still perfectly legitimate. The organization is fine. The cooperation is fine. The defensive force that's inherently justified is fine. The only thing you can't do is say, well, I have a badge, so I'm suddenly allowed to steal and commit aggression and do all these nasty things, which is what cops do every day. Tax
money.
Right. And call it taxes and boss you around and call it regulation or law enforcement.
And it's a really fine line once you give somebody a badge to when they try to become a tyrant, too. And how do you'd have to have some sort of check and balance system in there to keep, because it would be really easy for the sheriff or private security figure to become that tyrant.
Well, I don't think so. And here's why. Without the belief in government, like if I, by analogy, if I hire somebody to mow my lawn and I say, I'll give you however many bucks to mow my lawn. And then I come home and he's going through my refrigerator and he says, oh, well, you hired me to mow your lawn. I decided I'm allowed to go through your refrigerator. I'd say, I decide you're not allowed to go out or I'm going to hit you in the head with this chair. That's what people naturally do outside the belief in government. They don't, if you hire someone to protect you and he starts aggressing against you, he starts running a protection racket, the first victim, maybe the second victim, is going to shoot him in the head. And everybody else will say, yay. The moment the hired defender becomes an aggressor, if you shoot him, everybody says, well, good. He was supposed to protect us, crook, unless he was elected. In which case, the first person who shoots the quote-unquote tax collector or the quote-unquote law enforcement, he's viewed as evil, nasty, horrible criminal terrorist. Whereas without the belief in government, the moment that the guy you hired to protect you becomes the thug, all of his victims, all of his customers are going to say, this is not what we hired you for. And in fact, it's the exact opposite of what we hired you for. And we're going to stop you even, first of all, we're going to stop paying you. Second of all, if you don't stop, we're just going to shoot you because this isn't what we hired you for. And that's what would naturally happen if people didn't have the belief in government. If people really just viewed the guy they called in an emergency as just another person. He just has the same rights as us. He doesn't have the right to start running a collection racket or something and say, now you have to pay for my services. No, I don't. See this 12 gauge? It doesn't think I have to either. And that's what would naturally happen if people didn't imagine the guy with the badge to actually be some special superhuman authority. You can't make a brute force gang that can dominate an armed populace by brute force, unless they imagine it to be authority, and then they put up with all kinds of garbage. But it's just, you can't, if anybody tried that, you hire him to be a protector, and then he says, no, well, now you have to pay me. All of his customers, all of his victims are going to say, no, you're leaving here and you're never coming back, or we'll just shoot you. And then we're done, and then we hire somebody else. And maybe somebody else will think twice about thinking that he's now some special ruler.
Let's talk about the militia. Was the original idea of the militia for a group of people living together to be able to put together a sort of military to defend their local village or whatever?
Yeah, and there's, of course, there's different levels of organization that you can have. Everything from just, the average people have guns. Like, they never train, they never organize, they never plan ahead, to doing regular drills and actual, planning ahead and having actual military tactics planned out. But everything in between, the idea of a militia is that the normal people are armed and that's what's going to defend them. And the thing with that is normal people don't want to, drop their life and go running off to the other side of the world to kill people they don't know. It's just, even when they're actually attacked by an actually aggressive invader who's actually on their land, their first thought is, get that guy out of here so we can get back to our normal lives. Because this isn't what we want. We don't want to be having shootouts day after day. We want to get back to our normal lives. And so the founders at least got that right, that they realized having the people armed is the best way to stay free. Because, A, you cannot occupy a place where the average people are armed. It just doesn't work. It doesn't matter how big a standing army you have. There's always going to be another guy or 10 or 100 or 1,000 hiding behind a bush who's going to shoot you. And B, they don't want to cause conflicts. Average people don't want to go have shootouts. They want to live their life in peace. If you push them enough, they'll say, all right, we have to go grab the guns because this gang came into town or whatever. Then they fix it, and then they go back to normal. They don't have, the reason the founders were scared of a standing army is because it stands around, and then it wants a fight. It wants something to do. So it makes a make-work project.
Invade other countries on the other side of the planet that they're no threat to us, and then make up some big story about how they're a threat when you're really there to steal their resources.
Right. And, a citizen militia never in a million years would do such a thing. Like, I know, let's all get together and go over to Iraq and start shooting at people. That it doesn't happen outside of the belief in authority.
All right, let's talk about psychiatry and they're trying to make resistance to authority a mental disorder.
Well, in the first of all, there was a spoof article that came out. I think there was a real one too, and they were so close to each other. And I can't find the original one. There was a fake one that came out recently. That one of the dead giveaways is that the author was Ivor E. Tower, M.D. But they totally do try to say that, if you, what's the term? They have the oppositional defiance disorder or whatever it is, which goes along with that. They try to say there's something wrong with you. You have to be insane if you don't bow to government and laws and authority. And because to them, it is insane. And what's funny is it's just like, some tribe somewhere saying, hey, if you don't worship the volcano, something's wired wrong in your head. You're just a complete lunatic. You need to be locked up. From their perspective, that makes sense because we don't worship their God. We think their God is fake and bogus and evil and psychotic. And so from their perspective, they want to say this isn't just a difference of opinion. You're like deranged. Something's wrong with you that you don't bow to the masters that we bow to, or the masters we tell you to bow to. So yeah, Hitler did that. Lots of tyrants have done that to try to paint it as a mental disorder if somebody resists authority or disobeys or questions the government comes out with these they like to disguise them as news stories. It's just fear mongering fests. There was just one in Reuters recently. They talk about people who question the authority of the government, and the readers are all supposed to go, oh gosh, how could anybody do that? Because it really is, because it's a fundamentally different way to look at the world. And it's, those of us have been deprogrammed from the cult. Of course, we're going to look wacky and weird to the people still in the cult. And that's why the challenge is to get the people in it to see it isn't our view that's inconsistent and bizarre and immoral and destructive. It's the belief in government. But to the people who are still in the matrix, like Neo says, the people who are still in the matrix are still, in one sense, our enemy because they're fighting to keep the matrix alive. And they don't get that that's not in their best interest. It's not serving them. They were just trained to do it. So they view those of us who don't as nasty crazies who, I don't know what's driving those wacky people who don't respect law and order and government, but they're horrible and dangerous and nasty and evil. So it's sort of natural for them to view us that way because we're not in their cult anymore. And they either have to, so they have to pretend that we have some wacky cult-like beliefs because one of us must, and they don't want to admit that it's them.
All right. How would we teach our children morality versus authority?
This is, one of the root causes of most of the evil in the world, not to sound melodramatic again. People think you have to teach your kids to respect authority. So they, obey their parents and obey their teachers and obey the law and yada, yada, yada. And people think you have to do that so that the kids do good stuff. So they obey the laws against theft and murder and whatever else. But there's a logical disaster in that reasoning, which is if you teach someone to do as they're told, which is what teaching belief in authority is. It's that you're supposed to obey those guys over there no matter what. If you teach someone to do as they're told, then you sort of just have to hope that the people telling them to do stuff are going to tell them to do the right stuff. Whereas if you actually teach them morality, like each individual owns himself, aggression is bad, the non-aggression principle, don't steal, don't attack people, don't do these nasty. If you teach them actual morality and somebody comes along and says, hey, go to the other side of the world and kill some people for us, the person says, no, that's evil. Duh. Why would I do that? But if you teach them to respect authority, thinking that that's going to make them a good person, and authority comes along and says, please go to the other side of the world and start killing these people for us, they go, okay, right away. Yes, sir. Because you're not, to help someone become a human being is very different from programming somebody to be a robot. And teaching your kids to obey authority is programming your kids to be robots. Because if you're just teaching them to obey somebody else, like they're not even, their human isn't there, their free will isn't there, their judgment isn't there. They're just stupid programmable robots. And then you can hope that whoever tells them to do something is going to tell them good stuff, but they probably won't. And your kid, you made your kid into a robot. Whereas if you teach your kid to respect the self-ownership, the life, liberty, and property of every human being in the world, then authority not only becomes completely unnecessary, it becomes obviously counterproductive. Why would I teach my kid to obey somebody because they're older, they have a badge, or they got elected to some office, instead of teaching my kid that, look, here's right, here's wrong, do the right thing, please.
When I was growing up, and there was something in your book that really caught my attention, and I have always intentionally avoided this with my son, but my dad, his whole reasoning behind anything he said to do was, because I said so.
Yeah.
And I always explain things and break it down for my son, even if he doesn't understand in the least what I'm saying. I try and break it all down and explain it to him. And I was always really, that always really pissed me off when I was a kid about the whole because I said so thing. So what do you consider anti-authoritarian parenting?
Well, see, we don't teach our daughter Alyssa that obedience to us is ever a virtue in and of itself. We try to tell her, here's why we're doing certain things. We own the house, we own the car and stuff, so we have a certain amount of control over, she doesn't get to go jump in the car at 14 and drive around wherever she wants because it's our stuff. But we don't ever treat her like, you're supposed to obey us because we're your parents, and you're bad if you disobey. Never mind actual morality. We try to explain the reasons why we do things, and that doesn't mean she likes all of it. That doesn't mean she agrees with it or she gets everything she wants. She obviously doesn't. But we never teach the notion that you're this entity who is supposed to bow to us because we're a fundamentally different kind of entity. And that's what teaching authority is. And that's why people, they grow up viewing the parents as authority and then viewing teachers as authority. They go out in the world, all they can think about is, well, who do I blindly obey now? They don't know how to be human beings. And so we just, we emphasize the exact opposite of you already are a human being. You may not know very much. Maybe you haven't figured out a whole lot yet. But you're already a human being, and we're going to try to treat you like a human being instead of a subject or a pet or a robot. And that's, so many authoritarian parents predict that, well, they're just going to turn into horrible, violent animals. Well, no, actually, they're going to turn into people who won't be horrible, violent animals when authority says, go to the other side of the world and be a horrible, violent animal. They're the people who will say, no, why would I do that? That's insane and evil. So it's the exact opposite of what people think, which is that, don't teach them authority. Well, they're going to turn into, psychos and dangerous antisocial people. No, it's the exact opposite. You teach them you teach them by example how to be an actually moral human being who treats others as equals, and then they know how to do that. And it doesn't matter who gives them a command, they still know how to do it, and they know not to obey stupid commands, which puts them ahead of 70% of Americans who don't know not to obey stupid commands.
All right, Larken, would you like to read for us from the bottom of page 175 to the end of that little section there?
Yeah.
And that is on how different societies might develop rules.
Right. Because a lot of people sort of think like, well, it's just going to be chaos and, no moral standards at all. So this is called a different kind of rules. Without a belief in government, communities would almost certainly develop quote-unquote rules, which at first glance might resemble what are now called laws. But there would be a fundamental difference. It is both legitimate and useful to write down and publish for all to see statements about the consequences of doing certain things. People in one town may, for example, make it known that if you get caught stealing in their town, you will be subjected to forced labor until you pay back your victim threefold for what you stole. Or the people of some neighborhood may make it known that if you were caught driving drunk there, they will take your car and roll it into a lake. But while such decrees would constitute threats, they would be fundamentally different from what are now called laws for several reasons. Number one, the ones actually making the threats, the ones who decided what retribution they personally would feel justified in inflicting on those who harm or endanger their neighbors, would alone bear the responsibility for making and carrying out such threats. Number two, the threats would not require any election or consensus. One person or 1,000 people jointly could issue a warning in the form of, if I catch you doing this, I will do this to you. The threats would not be seen as the will of the people, but only as a statement of the intentions of those actually issuing the warning. Number three, the legitimacy of such threats would be judged not by who made the threats, but by whether the threatened consequence is, in the eyes of the observer, appropriate for the crime committed. No one would feel any agree with or abide by such a threat if they deemed it to be unfair or unjustified. Number four, such warnings would not pretend to alter morality or make up any new quote-unquote crimes, nor would anyone imagine such warnings to be legitimate simply because they were issued, the way people now view authoritarian quote-unquote laws. Instead, such warnings would simply constitute statements about what those making the threats believe to be justified. Therefore, instead of being in the authoritarian formula of, we hereby make the following illegal, the warnings would fit into this template. I believe that if you do this, I have the right to respond in this way. Many people, having been trained into authority worship, would be terrified of such a non-centralized, quote-unquote, free-for-all method of human interaction. But what if, the statist will ask, someone writes a threat that says, if I don't like your religion or your hairstyle or your dietary choices, I'll kill you? Examining that question in the context of society still suffering from the superstition of authority, and in the context of a society without such a belief, shows just how dangerous the authority superstition really is. It is true that in the absence of the belief in government, an individual could threaten violence in unjustified situations. The point is not that everyone will automatically think and behave properly if there are no rulers, but that such malicious tendencies in human beings would be far less dangerous and destructive without the belief in authority to legitimize them. And don't know how far you want me to go here. There's one example. I could do the example and stop.
Yeah, sure. Go for the example there.
Because it's a drastic example. For example, compare what happens when some individuals vehemently oppose alcohol consumption and when authority forbids it. It is possible, if unlikely, that an individual in a stateless society could, on his own, declare, I consider consuming alcohol to be a sin, and if I find out you've been drinking, I'm coming to your house with a gun to straighten you out. Any person who did so would almost certainly be persuaded, if not by polite reasoning, then by the threat of retaliatory violence, that he should not carry through on his threat and should stop making such threats. Obviously, one person could not, by himself, inflict oppression upon millions of beer drinkers, even among others who also considered drinking alcohol to be a sin. Even if it was a majority, few would feel justified in trying to forcibly impose their views onto others. Whether they recognize that such aggression is unjustified, or whether they were simply scared of what might be done to them if they tried, either way, violent conflict would be avoided. In contrast, suppose a group of people wearing the label of government declared alcohol to be illegal and created a heavily armed gang of enforcers to hunt down and imprison any caught possessing alcohol. Since that actually happened, there's no need to theorize about the results. With the promise of fixing most of society's ills and with public support, the U.S. ruling class enacted alcohol prohibition in 1920. Alcohol consumption continued, slightly reduced, and there immediately sprang up a black market in alcohol production and distribution. A hugely profitable but illegal market led to violent conflicts, a jump in organized crime and other crime, and widespread corruption in government, as well as brutal attempts to crush the alcohol trade. Seeing the actual results of prohibition, a majority of the people soon opposed it and demanded the repeal of the 18th Amendment, which authorized prohibition at the federal level. And of course, after prohibition ended, all of the related violence, government violence and private violence, ended.
Well, not really. Actually, what they did was Harry J. Anslinger started the war on drugs so that he wouldn't lose his police force. And we've been dealing that for 70-plus years now, is the irony of it all.
Right. Yep. I actually have a video about to come out about that shows that the people who want drug prohibition, they have no intention and no hope of stamping out drugs. They want the violence and crime.
You know, it's all these idiots that keep drugs illegal, and then they complain about all the mobs and gangsters at the borders of Mexico and all the gun running and all this stuff. It's like, look, you idiots, if you legalize drugs, all of that will be gone tomorrow. Tomorrow. Yep. That's it. Tomorrow. It's gone.
And done. We have a perfect example to point to, which is alcohol prohibition. It disappeared instantly. It was Hillary Clinton. Somebody asked her, I guess her controllers didn't keep him away, why don't you legalize it if we're so scared of the Mexican drug cartels and all that? And she sort of stammered and said, well, there's too much money involved. I don't know what she tried to mean by that, but that's the truth. There's too much power and money involved in the black market that the government created for them to give it up, because they know the related violence would stop overnight. Because, you ever seen a shootout between wine cooler sellers? It just doesn't happen because it's quote unquote legal.
Does a society without government mean every man for himself?
No. And this is another huge bogus assumption that people make. For some reason, they say, well, if everybody runs off in the woods and lives like a hermit. Government isn't the same as cooperation and organization. In fact, it's the opposite. Cooperation is like you and I get together and say, let's do this thing this way. Government is one person comes to another and says, you're going to do it this way or we hurt you. And the idea, and the fact that we have a zillion examples that you can look at in the real world of hugely complex, purely voluntary arrangements that are very efficient and get lots of stuff done and very productive. But people have been so trained to think that the ruling class is why we get along. It's why we have food and it's why we have roads, and that people think that the completely irrational thought that, well, if we didn't have a ruling class, we'd all be like every man for himself.
There's Ayn Rand's appeal to authority fallacy again.
Right. Right. And it's just, there's no reason to think that. And, if you ask anybody, well, would you suddenly turn into some raving psychotic animal running around killing people? Well, no, I wouldn't, but other people might. Well, everybody says I wouldn't, but other people might, which sort of tells me I don't think very many people would. And the ones that would, they sort of have to deal with the fact that their intended victims have guns. So it wouldn't work well for the few who actually thought it would be a good idea, because there's no government to run around and try to victimize people. They'd quickly learn, no, that doesn't work. And yeah, to think that we can't cooperate without government it's like saying, well, how can there be car dealers without carjackers? Like, you don't need the thieves to make the productive side work. They're the opposite. Government is a giant thieving extortionist parasite. We don't need that to do voluntary trade. It's the opposite of voluntary trade. But people have just been so trained to think that nanny state is what keeps us, mere mortals civilized, that they have these completely irrational beliefs about what would happen if there wasn't a ruling class.
All right, we did cover this a little bit, but how do we defend against aggressors?
Yeah, again, just, people, and I tell people, do you believe you have the right to defend yourself against someone breaking into your house? Well, yeah, but maybe I don't have the ability. Okay, do you have the right to hire somebody else? Well, yeah. Like, all the things that we as normal human beings have the right to do, we would still have the right to do them. And you can be organized, you can cooperate, you can hire people. Like, either, you're too squeamish, you're not sure you can defend yourself, you don't want to have a gun, you want to hire somebody else. There's a million different ways to do it voluntarily. What it boils down to is...
Sure, maybe your whole neighborhood gets together and you all elect one person in the neighborhood who's got the best defensive skills to, and you all pay him a pittance, or you all chip in to buy him a gun or whatever, and then he's your local little block, sheriff or whatever.
Yeah, and he's the guy you call if there's a problem. And the only difference, it's a huge difference, but the only difference is you call him and he shows up. He's just a human being. He has the same rights as you. He doesn't have extra rights. He can't suddenly boss people around. He can't suddenly commit theft and do all. He's just the guy you call. He's like a friend you call who knows how to fight or has a gun or something. Hey, somebody's breaking my house. Hey, Fred, can you come over here? I'm a wimp and I'm unarmed and whatever. Fred, come help me. That's what it would be like. And, you can call that police if you want, but it would be, again, it's just that one difference, but it's a huge difference. Right now, how many people are nervous when they see the flashing lights? Oh, what did I do? Some stupid technical thing, and now he's going to give me a ticket and steal $100 from me. There wouldn't be that if the guy just represented you, if he was actually, like people pretend, if he was actually your servant. Like, we chip in so that Fred can drive around the neighborhood at night and keep an eye on things, call if something goes wrong. He's still just Fred. He doesn't have magical powers. He doesn't have superhuman rights. He's just Fred, and that would still happen. And it would be a lot more effective than what we have now.
Well, it's interesting, all of your talk about this, and I spent a month and a half in Peru in 2009, and in Lima, you see private security everywhere. Pretty much at every home or every apartment building, there are private security guards, and a lot of people just hire their own security. And, the person who's doing the security, they open the door for you and they take care of your, neighbors or your groceries and stuff like that, and, help people in and out of the building and this stuff all at the same time. So, it already, your idea is already sort of, sure, Lima and these other big cities have police, but here is your idea of a voluntary type of security already in place all over Lima, because they prefer the private security that's right there compared to the police.
Right, even after they're forced to pay for the crummy government version. And I would bet money that those private security guards don't act like rude control freak fascists, because that's not what their customers want.
They continually helped us with our luggage and opened doors for us, called upstairs for us, helped out with things. It was,
because they're in a position where they have to get voluntary customers. The jackboot who pulls you over and harasses you and is on his little fascist power trip, what does he care about what you think of him? You're forced to pay his salary whether you like him or not. Even if you think he was a complete fascist pig, he knows the tax collectors are going to make you pay him. If it's voluntary, suddenly they have to act as if, even if they would like to be obnoxious, they sort of need to keep their job, which means you have to keep the customers happy, which means don't act like a fascist. So, yeah, they'd be nice and plenty of people in this country, they usually have a bunch of money, but have private security, and they don't go around being fascist to the people that the property owners want there, because who the heck would...
Let's not talk about Blackwater.
Yeah, well, I don't think I'd call that private. The fact that the government bought what would have been a private thing, it's just their own...
Sure,
sort of...
and of course they wouldn't have had all of that quote-unquote authority to do all of those things without quote-unquote government helping them. So, all right. So again, how do we deter crooks?
By violence, to be blunt, but by violence that normal human beings see as inherently legitimate. By, each person says, you can understand, like, I believe I have the right to use force to repel an invader or kill him if I can't repel him. And just if we just use our own moral codes and our own judgment, even though they won't always match, there's going to be differences here and there, but there is so much overlap among almost everybody that it would be really easy to come up with, a dozen different ways to hire somebody and cooperate. And it may just be something as simple as everybody have the phone numbers of all your neighbors handy. So if someone's breaking in, you call the guy right next to you. And he comes over with a shotgun and makes sure everything's okay. And he isn't going to suddenly try to oppress you because he knows, first of all, he knows you. He knows he doesn't have the right to do that. He doesn't imagine himself to be authority. He's just a guy. And ultimately, he knows you would shoot him if he did. So it's just people being people doesn't rule out anything positive, dealing with aggressors and it doesn't make it so there's anything the good people can't do except the illegitimate aggression. That's the only thing that disappears from society is the violence that's only imagined to be legitimate when government does it. When anybody else does it, it's called theft or thuggery or whatever else. But government is seen to have these special rules. You get rid of that, and suddenly people see themselves as people, and they see everybody else as people, and realize, defending yourself, good. Attacking somebody else, bad. Most people grasp that in their day-to-day lives, and that would continue when they organize and cooperate to find ways to defend themselves. And I actually think, to a large degree, that's in a lot of places that's not even necessary. If normal people have guns, even just the normal person himself who has a gun is a pretty good deterrent, even if he never organized or planned anything. Not that they can't, but just the people being armed and realizing it's up to them to protect themselves, that goes a long way to being a huge deterrent. Like you were saying in Switzerland, when everybody has to have a machine gun, who's going to be dumb enough to try to go door to door robbing people? It just, even if they never practiced and didn't drill at all, just the knowledge that, my intended victim might kill me is a pretty good deterrent, even to the most, heartless, sadistic psycho out there.
Yeah, that's for sure. Hence why they have one of the lowest crime rates in the entire world.
Right.
So let's see. What do you do if a factory was dumping toxic waste?
That's, the first thing comes down to property issues. If you have a stream running through your property and it's bubbling in green, that's a property offense. They're basically messing up your property. And you could say the same thing if fumes are coming into your house through the air. But again, the more fundamental thing is people would look at these problems from the perspective of normal people. They wouldn't look to, well, who are we going to elect and what legislation should we have? It may be something as direct as the homeowners going to the factory and saying, look, there's green bubbly stuff coming down our stream. You're going to stop it right now, or we're going to come back and do such unpleasant things that you're going to wish you had stopped it. That's sort of the uncivilized, quote unquote, blunt, direct version of deterrence to polluting other people's property and harming their stuff. But of course, there are a million more, quote unquote, civilized, proper things. You have a petition or you have a boycott. But ultimately, if you're a factory and there isn't a government to pay off and you're dumping garbage that's going down the stream through other people's property, right now you pay off the government, you pay off the EPA, and you might be in pretty good shape. You try it without a government, you have a big line of victims down there who really don't like you and will be willing to hurt you if you don't stop, polluting the heck out of their stream or their air or whatever. So again, it comes down to just people thinking like people. And if somebody's doing something that actually harms you, then you have the right to go stop them. And again, there are the direct sort of simplistic brute versions of cut it out or I'm going to hit you on the head with this baseball bat. And lots of more, nicer, starting out nicer than that versions. But it just comes down to people thinking, what do I believe I personally have the right to do about the fact that there's green sludge flowing down my stream from the factory? Because I don't believe I have an obligation to put up with this. So I may start by writing them a letter that says, yeah, there's green sludge. I really hope it's going to stop really soon. And I hope you do something about the fact that it came down here. Up to people just saying, look, if you keep dumping sludge in the stream that goes through our property, we're just going to come trash your factory. Again, there's a million ways it could go. And that doesn't even mean I agree with all of them. But if people just thought in terms of we're just people, there wouldn't be a government to buy off. There wouldn't be all this stupid legislation and regulation and expensive lawyers that can find some loophole to this, that, or the other thing. There would just be people being people, which I think 10 times out of 10 is going to give this than a giant government court system that can be bought off.
Has there ever been an intentional effort that you're aware of to misinform people about what anarchy is, and what examples of anarchy are there that people can relate to in everyday life?
It's hard for me to tell how much of the bad rap that the word anarchy gets, how much is just sort of indirect, accidental, because people have been taught that government is what makes us civilized, so they assume that if there isn't that, we're all wild, stupid animals. And how much has been intentional propaganda by the people in power, telling us that, and there has been plenty of each, but I'm not sure what the exact balance is, but there's been plenty of constant propaganda from those in power that basically says, if people are left free, you'll be killing each other, the crime rate will go through the roof, you'll all just be killing and eating each other, and it'll just be total mayhem, there'll be no justice, it'll be every man for himself, and all the things that the chaos version of the term anarchy
Mad Max
bring to mind, right? Mad Max. And just it shows how economically ignorant people are, because the idea that, okay, we don't have a ruling class, let's just suddenly all be psychos. People don't want to be psychos. They want to have houses, they want to have roads, they want to have cars, they want to have comfortable lives. They don't suddenly want to turn into animals just because there aren't politicians to cry to. But nonetheless, the term anarchy, partly just because people have been trained to think that government makes us civilized, and partly from an intentional effort by those in power to give this impression, people think of anarchy as meaning chaos. And it's actually, the word, conveniently for the statists, has two meanings. One meaning there's no ruling class, and the other meaning chaos and mayhem. How convenient for them to have one word that means both of them. So I think it's partly intentional propaganda, but partly it's just the people passing on the lies that they were taught just accidentally. Like, they're not trying to lie to the next generation. They've just been taught that civilization and obeying masters are the same thing, and they require each other, and otherwise it's chaos and mayhem. But that's just loony.
All right, and did you give any examples of, I think I asked you that, but let's go into a few examples of anarchy that people can relate to in everyday life. Oh, yeah. People always say, well, point to some place where anarchy works. Anarchy is most of the world most of the time. Like, if you go into a supermarket, there isn't a fascist there saying, hey, you walk on the right side of this and you walk on this side, and controlling the line of people who go up to the counter. It's literally anarchy. You can have 1,000 people in this crowded thing, and they all, they take turns for each other and they move in. Some are more rude than the others, but there aren't very many shootouts. And people just sort of don't notice. All right, here's this store shootout, news at 11.
Right. In a mall, in a grocery store, there's a zillion people that go in. Nobody is being forced to produce any food for anybody. Everybody there is doing it voluntarily because of what he personally gets out of it. The clerk is doing it because he gets paid. The CEO is doing it because he gets paid a lot. Customers are doing it because they want food. It really is anarchy. Now, of course, there are 8 zillion government tentacles interfering with the whole game. So it's not, we certainly don't have a free market in this country and haven't for a zillion years. But the basic situation is anarchy. It's not an authoritarian run situation. It's lots and lots of individuals in a very complex form of organization and cooperation that benefits everybody involved. Some people get the benefit of food. Some people get the benefit of a paycheck. But everybody there is literally acting out anarchy. And just for some reason, even though you can see that in a whole bunch of different aspects of human life, people think, well, there are some aspects that if we left that up to people just being people, it would be chaos and mayhem. Like, defending ourselves. We have to have a big parasitic ruling class that forcibly robs us to protect us, because for some reason we can handle food production and distribution and automobiles and communications and all sorts of things. But for some reason, if it came to defending ourselves from the occasional crook, it would be chaos and mayhem if we didn't have a giant parasitic extortionist gang protecting us.
Sure, I think even in your book you gave the example that pulling up to a stop sign is anarchy.
Right, a four-way stop sign. And there are a bunch of them around where I live. People pull up at the same time. I think there's technically some rule about if it's actually at the same time, this guy has
the right always has the right of way.
Right, although it's never exactly at the same time, and it's supposed to be the first person to get there. How often do you see people come up to a stop sign and then they both just floor it and crash into each other? It just doesn't happen. People don't want to crash into each other. And that's, some people even use the thing of, well, if there weren't any laws, people would just drive on the wrong side of the road. I said, who do you think is so stupid that if suddenly there wasn't going to be a ticket for driving on the wrong side of the road, it wouldn't occur to them that there's other reasons not to drive on the wrong side of the road?
We have all agreed to drive on the left side or on the right side, while in England and Australia, everybody has agreed to drive on the left. And that's how we work it in those places,
Right, and it
by
seems
consent.
to work. And people do it out of their own best interest. They don't want to crash into each other. And, the idea that we would all just be so stupid that we would literally just randomly drive into each other if there wasn't a cop there to give us a ticket for doing that. Like, what? How low an estimate do you have of the capacity of humanity that you actually think that a person wouldn't mind smashing his car every 5 minutes unless he's going to get a ticket from a cop, and then suddenly he'll care? That's not how human beings work.
And would you like to close out this end of this three-part series by reading us from page 207 to the end?
Yeah, let me get that here. All right, here we go. And the book ends talking about the world without authority. So this part is called Accepting Reality. Statists often say, show me an example of where society without government, quote-unquote, anarchy, has worked. Of course, since they are speaking of societies consisting almost entirely of thoroughly indoctrinated authoritarians, human society without a ruling class is rarely even contemplated, much less accepted. Yet the statists use the fact that they have never tried true freedom, because the concept is completely foreign to their way of thinking, as proof that a stateless society, quote-unquote, wouldn't work. This would be akin to a group of medieval doctors who all use leeches for every ailment, arguing, show me one case where a doctor has cured a headache without the use of leeches. Of course, if none of them have ever considered any treatment other than leeches, there would not be an example of alternative methods working. But this would be a testament to the ignorance of the doctors, not the ineffectiveness of treatments which have never been tried. But the more important point is that anarchy is what is. To say that society cannot exist without government is exactly as reasonable as saying that Christmas cannot occur without Santa Claus. Society already exists without government and has from the beginning. It's been the people imagining an entity with the right to rule, hallucinating a thing called authority, which has made the story of mankind consist largely of oppression, violence, suffering, murder, and mayhem. Ironically, statists often point to the death and suffering which occurs when two or more groups are fighting over who should be in charge, label that as anarchy, and cite it as evidence that without government there would be chaos and death. But such bloodshed and oppression is the direct, obvious result of the belief in authority, not the result of a lack of government. It is true that, compared to life under a stable, entrenched authoritarian regime, in a country where the people are fighting over who the new authority should be, via rebellions, civil wars, one nation conquering another, etc., can be a lot more dangerous and unpredictable. As a result, people living in war-torn areas often wish only for there to be an end to the conflict, for one side to win and become the new government. To such people, a stable government may represent relative peace and security, but the underlying cause of the oppression committed by stable regimes and the bloodshed which occurs during struggles for power is the belief in authority. If no one believed in legitimate ruling class, no one would fight over who should rule. If there was no throne, no one would fight over it. All civil wars and nearly all revolutions rest on the assumption that someone should be in charge. Without the superstition of authority, there would be no reason for such things to happen at all. By its very nature, government adds nothing positive to society. It creates no wealth and generates no virtue. It adds only immoral violence and the illusion that such violence is legitimate. Allowing some people to forcibly dominate all others, which is all that government ever does not contribute to society one speck of talent or ability or productivity or resourcefulness or ingenuity or creativity or knowledge or compassion or any other positive quality possessed by human beings. Instead, it constantly stifles and limits all of those things through its coercive laws. It is destructive and insane to accept the notion that civilization requires the forcible limiting of possibilities and the violent restraint of the human mind and spirit. That civil society can exist only if the power and virtue of every individual is forcibly overcome and suppressed by a gang of masters and exploiters. That the average man cannot be trusted to govern himself, but that politicians can be trusted to govern everyone else. That the only way for the morality and virtue of mankind to shine through is to crush the free will and self-determination of billions of human beings and to convert them all into unthinking, obedient puppets of a ruling class and a source of power for tyrants and megalomaniacs. That the path to civilization is the destruction of individual free will, judgment, and self-determination. That is the foundation, the heart and soul of the superstition called authority. When people are ready to recognize that heinous lie for what it is and begin to accept personal responsibility for their own actions and for the state of society, and not one moment before, then true humanity can begin. People can desperately wish for peace on earth until they're blue in the face, but they will never see it unless and until they are willing to pay the price by giving up one tired old superstition. The solution to most of society's ills is for you, dear reader, to recognize the myth of authority for what it is, give it up in yourself, and then begin efforts to deprogram and wake up all the people you know who, as a result of their indoctrination into the cult of authority worship, and in spite of their virtues and noble intentions, continue to support and participate in the violent, anti-human, destructive, and evil oppression and aggression machine known as government. And the punchline revisited, and then we're finished.
Indeed.
Indeed. Contrary to what nearly everyone has been taught to believe, government is not necessary for civilization. It is not conducive to civilization. It is, in fact, the antithesis of civilization. It is not cooperation or working together or voluntary interaction. It is not peaceful coexistence. It is coercion. It is force. It is violence. It is animalistic aggression cloaked by pseudo-religious cult-like rituals which are designed to make it appear legitimate and righteous. It is brute thuggery disguised as consent and organization. It is the enslavement of mankind, the subjugation of free will, and the destruction of morality masquerading as civilization and society. The problem is not just authority can be used for evil. The problem is that, at its most basic essence, it is evil. In everything it does, it defeats the free will of human beings, controlling them through coercion and fear. It supersedes and destroys moral consciences, replacing them with unthinking blind obedience. It cannot be used for good any more than a bomb can be used to heal a body. It is always aggression, always the enemy of peace, always the enemy of justice. The moment it ceases to be an attacker, it ceases to fit the definition of government. It is, by its very nature, a murderer and a thief, the enemy of mankind, a poison to humanity. As dominator and controller, ruler and oppressor, it can be nothing else. The alleged right to rule, in any degree and in any form, is the opposite of humanity. The initiation of violence is the opposite of harmonious coexistence. The desire for dominion is the opposite of love for mankind. Hiding the violence under layers of complex rituals and self-contradictory rationalizations and labeling brute thuggery as virtue and compassion does not change that fact. Claiming noble goals, saying that the violence is the will of the people or that it is being committed for the common good or for the children cannot change evil into good. Legalizing wrong does not make it right. One man forcibly subjugating another, no matter how it is described or how it is carried out, is uncivilized and immoral. The destruction it causes, the injustice it creates, the damage it does to every soul that it touches, perpetrators, victims, and spectators alike, cannot be undone by calling it law or by claiming that it was necessary. Evil, by any name, is still evil. The ultimate message here is very simple. All of recorded history screams it, yet very few have until now allowed themselves to hear it. That message is this: if you love death and destruction, oppression and suffering, injustice and violence, repression and torture, helplessness and despair, perpetual conflict and bloodshed, then teach your children to respect authority and teach them that obedience is a virtue. If, on the other hand, you value peaceful coexistence, compassion and cooperation, freedom and justice, then teach your children the principles of self-ownership. Teach them to respect the rights of every human being, and teach them to recognize and reject the belief in authority for what it is: the most irrational, self-contradictory, anti-human, evil, destructive, and dangerous superstition the world has ever known.